I'm quickly going on Twitter to see the link that you sent out so I can send some of my friends.
Okay, well, we are live now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Wife with a Purpose. I am interviewing two gentlemen today from South Africa. We have with us Willem and Rational Gent. And go ahead and put your questions in the question box on the live video. I'm going to be trying to keep up with the comment section. If you have a question that you would like me to ask either one of them, please tag me in the comment, and I will be able to better see that and relay that question to them. So remember that if you'd like to support my channel so that I can keep doing this and keep bringing these sorts of guests to you in the future, you can always go to wifewithapurpose.com/support, and there you will find all of the ways that you can support my channel. All right, so without further ado, welcome Willem and Rational Gent. Rational Gent is, of course, a little disguised and using a pseudonym to hide his identity. So that's why that is set up that way. But Rational Gent, would you go ahead and introduce yourself briefly to the audience and let us know kind of what your background is and what you'd like to talk about today?
Well, yeah, I just want to say hi there to your viewers and thanks for having us on the show. Yeah, I was a full-blown liberal living in Cape Town a few years ago. And I had quite a traumatic experience at the start of the year, and I just thought it would be necessary to try and get the word out about what's happening here in South Africa, which is why I'm really grateful that people like you and others are willing to listen to our story. I'm currently studying law at the University of Stellenbosch, and yeah, I am wearing a disguise at the moment, and I do use a pseudonym on Twitter because we do have links to the government, and I prefer it if I was, anonymous.
Right, that makes sense. Yes. So Willem, will you let us know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm from the northern part of the country, and I'm Afrikaans. We have two different white, you can call them tribes here in South Africa. The English people who are mostly in the south and by the seasides, and then the Afrikaans people who are mostly the farmer communities on the inland where there's no sea, and so we're more the farmers and on the more industrial inlands or so. So I wasn't like Rational Gent here, liberal, because I've been on the front line of all the violence and everything that was happening here. So yeah, that's basically where I'm from. And I just decided from this year on, I'm going to go public and start talking about the stuff that's happening here in South Africa. That's why I decided to come on your channel and answer your questions or so.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys for being here. So Rational Gent, why don't you give me a little bit about the history of how your ancestors came to South Africa and kind of just like a brief synopsis of how they got there and what they've done in South Africa.
Okay, sure thing. Well, as you can probably hear from our accents and our build, we come from two different white tribes in South Africa. My mother's side of the family, we came here in the late 1800s from Ireland and England. Obviously, through marriage, we landed up, coming to Port Elizabeth, which is on the East Coast. And then we landed up settling in Cape Town. And on my father's side, we've been in South Africa, well, in Southern Africa since the early 1800s. Our surnames were of German descent. So we came from the German inhabitants and colonists from Namibia, and we landed up in Cape Town, and we were mainly, involved in construction and such. So we built a few of the neighborhoods and suburbs here in Cape Town during its formative stages.
Excellent. Okay, and Willem, tell me a little bit about your people's history, the farmer history, and how your people came to South Africa and what they built and what they settled.
We came here a little bit earlier than the English population came here. We came here at about 1652. That's when the first Dutch East India Company settled the Cape first. We were actually the first people to be in the Cape. When we arrived here, there was no one here. No native, so-called native tribes. I mean, if you say Africa, then everyone thinks Africans are all everywhere. But actually, when my people came here, there weren't any Africans here. And that was about 150 years before the English came here. And we started building farms here in the Cape so that we can supply the ships that are on their way to India for the spice routes. to go to India and go sell European stuff there and buy spices which they would sell in Europe again. So that was the main purpose of the colony, of the Dutch colony of the Cape of Good Hope. And then later the English came and they recolonized it after the Dutch were at war with Spain. Because when the Dutch were at war with Spain, the Spanish Empire actually destroyed the Dutch Empire, sort of. So we were left without any connections to the Netherlands, and we were on our own. We actually had to form a country of our own because there was no connection with the Netherlands anymore. So we were living here on our own as what we called vryburgers. That's what we called ourselves, which means free citizens of South Africa. And from there we started building the cities of Cape Town and George and Graafrenet. You'll find these cities all over the southern part of South Africa. And then later, when the English came here in the 1800s, we had some conflicts with them, so we moved upwards to the north, and that was actually about the same time as the Black African tribes came here. The first Black African tribe to actually settle an empire here was called the Zulu Empire. I don't know if you heard about them. Mm-hmm. If you can go look them up on Wikipedia, their first king Shaka, he set his empire here in 1812. So that was about 160 years after we did. And then that's when the big problem started between the Africans here and the Europeans, because there were clashes between them all the time. And our people then moved up to what we call Natal now, and the Transvaal and the Free State. And we actually bought some land from the Black tribes there. And that's where we basically settled our cities in the north, which is also the capital cities of South Africa, like Bloemfontein and Pretoria and so on. So that's where we live, and that's also the area that's more like, there's more Black people there, and with the Black people came more crime there. Like in the Cape, there's a lot less Black people, so there's a lot less crime. It's actually quite very, very non-politically correct thing to say, but it's the truth.
For a bit of perspective, the region I live in, the Western Cape, it's the only region in sub-Saharan Africa where Black people aren't a majority. It's unique in the entire African continent. So in cities like Cape Town, well-known, safe, first world cities like Cape Town, where I'm from, we're a bunch of liberals. All the Europeans there are liberals because we don't come into contact with folks like Villa much too much. So we really aren't aware of the violence that takes place and the murders and the crime. But in the last 15 to 20 years, the Black population in Cape Town has almost tripled. This is still from the normal Bantu migration that's taken place for the last hundreds of years. So they're starting to settle near Cape Town. And a lot more of us are having these really crazy, violent experiences, and it's waking us up. Same thing happened to me. I was a liberal at the start of the year. I'll tell the story of what happened to me a bit later. But yeah, I had quite a traumatic experience, and that changed me. That kind of pushed me to, kind of get the word out about what's going on over here.
Okay, yeah, I definitely want to talk about your experience. But just to back up, because I want to be really clear on this point, because a lot of Americans and a lot of liberals don't understand this. So when both of your ancestors settled in South Africa and built the community, the towns, the cities that they did, there were no native Black tribes living there at that time. That was empty land that they settled on their own, correct?
Yeah, when my dad was a child in Cape Town, he said there were hardly any Black people here. In fact, when Cape Town was initially colonized and they used indentured laborers, there weren't any Black people to use as cheap labor. You have to look at the history of European colonization. We actually got Malay slaves. There were no Black people.
Right. So where did they come from? And I know that you had said that they started coming in, the Zulu tribe, in 1812. So they were maybe further north or somewhere else in Africa. And why, do we know why they started coming down toward the white settled areas?
For the Gibbs.
Yeah.
For the Gibbs, of course. Like, let's put it bluntly. In the Black population from 1900 to 2000 grew 900%. I think in the 80s, we were getting like 2,000 Black people crossing our border every day. And this is a phenomenon that European nations need to wake up to. South Africa was the first to utilize cheap third world labor. So we welcomed them across the border. We paid them a pittance and we lived like kings. And I look at Europe welcoming in a bunch of third worlders, paying them pittance. You look at GDPs growing in the United Kingdom, but their wages are going down because of all the import. But what people need to understand is that cheap third world immigration is the most expensive form of labor you can ever have. It costs you your civilization.
Yes, that's important. That's a very important point. I'm really glad that you brought that up. That's so true. So just to review, so your ancestors came, they settled an area that was unoccupied, and I guess for a while they had some sort of border protection, and they did not allow blacks in. Would you tell us a little bit about apartheid? Because I know growing up in the United States in the 1980s and 90s, I heard a lot about apartheid in South Africa. We need to end apartheid, end apartheid. And as a child, I didn't even know what apartheid was, but I just was totally, told that it was the most evil thing in the world, to the point where I kind of, would recoil in horror at the very word apartheid. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and what that means and how it ended and what that's meant for your communities?
Well, it was essentially, in the beginning, it was a protective measure about our people because we saw crime spiking, we saw murders and everything. You can look at the history books, actually, like there are pictures, drawings and paintings of this where Zulu people and Matabele people, that's another tribe, were actually stealing babies and hitting their heads over the ox wagons to kill them, and just cutting off body parts of women while the men was out and stuff like that. So out of that grew the concept. It wasn't called apartheid then. It was actually called just separate development, where we said, no, we can't have all these other non-European tribes coming into our areas because it's just, they're killing off all of our people. So we had the system where we had our own cities, and they would live outside the cities in sort of townships where they would come from every day and come work inside the city, and then they have to go back to their own cities at 8 p.m. So before the night starts, they had to be out of the city. And that actually helped a lot with crime because South Africa had one of the lowest crime rate of any of the Western or white nations in the world. I mean, our crime rate back then was lower than Britain or Germany or any of those places. Eastern Europe had a crime rate of about 4 to 5 times as high as we did. And that's basically because of apartheid, because we kept these other tribes out of our cities and our settlements. But the thing is, they wanted to come because we had money, because of all the industries that were booming here and the mines and everything that we started. They came from all over Africa, as far as Malawi. I don't know if you can see on a map where Malawi is. It's there by the Great Lakes district.
Like Central Africa.
In Africa. That's where the Nguni tribes, which is the Zulus and the Xhosas, and also the Ndebeles, where they actually come from. And they all came here to South Africa, and we just needed something to protect our own, to protect our people. And that's why separate development grew. And it's also not like we ever oppressed them. We just had a separate systems of development. Like we said, we would develop our own schools, our own healthcare, everything. They should just do the same, but they never developed their systems. They kept their own systems down till the point in the 1960s where the Dr. Verwoerd actually said, but we need something. We need Bantu education, he called it. It was a system of education for the black people because they never taught their children anything like how to read or about the world or anything. So he actually said, we need to provide education for these people because they can't be down there for so long. We can't keep them down so long. And then he actually started the Bantu education system where we as white people would provide schools and go teach the black children in their areas. But that just made them angry because once we started to learn them some stuff, they wanted to be like us. They decided, no, the difference between us and them are education, and it's a privilege that we have that they don't have. But they never foresaw the fact that all the education that they did get up until then came from us. And that's what caused all the problems here. They started standing up and saying, no, we keep keeping them out of our schools, out of our universities, out of our cities, which was essentially true. But the reason for that is not the one that the liberal media has been pushing for the narrative for the past 23 years now.
I would like to say something if you let me. I have a few points. The period we're living in now, the 1994 one man, one vote up until 2017 has been the second bloodiest period in South African history. There have been over 500,000 deaths, and this is only surpassed by the Great Mefakani War in the 1800s, where the black tribes killed over 1 million of their own, which is why when the Afrikaner settlers went up to the north of the country, there was no one there. They'd all migrated or they all died. Between 1 and 2 million people were murdered. So this period right now is exceptionally violent. So I hear people and liberals and black people in South Africa say, well, you know, we have freedom now. Everything's free. But what do we have? What is freedom? Is freedom walking out your house, living in fear of your own life? Is freedom living in homes that resemble jail cells? I'll put it to you this way. In the last 4 days, I drove to actually pick up Willem. He flew down from Pretoria. I'm in Cape Town. I saw a train on fire. That was normal. A day after that, my dad is driving down the highway because he works in these messed up areas, in these black areas. He works there. He was driving and he saw a teenage boy chasing after someone else with an AK-47 while a policewoman drove past. This is normal. This is entirely normal. If you hear that your friend's been mugged or stabbed, you laugh at him because he's still alive. That's how normal it is. We live, I would say, in the most violent country on earth that isn't in a war zone. But then again, define war zone. 21,000 people dead every year. More people die in a week in South Africa than the entirety of deaths that took place in police detention in apartheid. What is freedom?
Mm-hmm. It's shocking to hear the numbers laid out like that. It's absolutely shocking. So just to summarize, all right, so what we have is we have white settlers coming down. They settled an area where there were no black people. There were no black tribes. They built a city. They created a wonderful, thriving, safe civilization. And then we had tribes coming from all over the place, as far as middle of Africa, very, very far away, coming and wanting to work and live in or near these white communities. So a system of separate development was created. So whereas the whites would have their own sovereign areas where they could educate their children and have their civilization, and the blacks could have their areas where they were free to do the same. But the whites also allowed the blacks to come in during the day and work jobs for them if they wanted. They had to go home at night, go back to their communities at night. But the black tribes never developed anything beyond that, even though they were given the opportunity to work and earn wages in these civilizations built by the white people in South Africa. The blacks never used that opportunity of wage and employment and jobs to then take that back to their community and create schools or create any kind of system. And so the whites, taking pity on the black tribes, came in, created schools, and then the blacks decided that it was education, that was the difference between the black and white success rate down there. And they started to demand more and more access to white areas. Now that the apartheid is over and we don't have this separate development anymore down there, you have just escalating crime rates that make it, to the point where it's like living in a war zone. It's gone from being one of the safest civilizations probably in the history of the world, I would imagine, since we're living in one of the safer times in the history of the world, and it was one of the safest civilizations, to now being like a war zone. Okay, so now, Rational Jen, go ahead and please tell us what was the experience that you had earlier this year that was your awakening to everything that's going on.
Well, yeah, this year was a crazy year. It was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. I was having a bit of issues at home, so I decided to just drive back, just check a few things out, and I was with my girlfriend. So we're driving at night, and to get from my town to Cape Town, you need to cross a highway. But that highway has got a huge township next to it called Khayelitsha. That township has a higher murder rate than Afghanistan. and it's got the highest murder rates in the country. So you can understand how crazy it is. So I'm driving, and there's a piece of wood on the highway, and it's got nails and glass in it, and it takes out my front tire. So my tire explodes, the car starts wobbling, nearly overturns. So I'm on my rim, I pull over to the side. I know I'm in deep, deep trouble. I call the police. I call the police 3 times, and they don't rock up. It's one of those things where I live, we have the means to afford private security. But you know, the police doesn't function, and when you rely on them, you know they aren't going to come. So I call them 3 times, and I know in the back of my head they're not going to pitch. So I end up calling my dad, who works in these areas, and I tell him, listen, Dad, this is the situation. I'm stranded next to Kailicha, and he loses the plot. He's like, Mikhail, this is a tactic that they use. They're coming to kill you. So I've got my girlfriend next to me. She's screaming. She's crying. I'm trying to calm her down. I managed to turn the car around. I have to drive away. And you know, I'm on the highway. Cars, trucks are going past me. Police vans are going past me. But you know they're not going to stop for you, because who the hell would want to stop there, you know? So I'm driving for about 20 minutes, like 20 kilometers an hour, just trying to get out the area. Cars wobbling. I'm on my rim. It's not good. And this vehicle pulls up behind me, and I'm going, oh my Lord, they're coming to kill me. They're coming to rape my girlfriend. They're going to slit my throat. They're going to put a bullet in her head. And I'm thinking, I wish I had a gun. I wish I had a gun. So, you know, when governments say they want to disarm you and take away your Second Amendment rights, don't listen to them, my friends. Don't listen to them. So I'm driving, and this car's tailing me for 5 minutes, and they start getting out. But at that point, my dad was already coming. So he pulls in front of them, and they managed to speed away. It was the most spiritual moment of my life. That was my Damascus moment. That's when I realized we are in a lot of trouble. It was crazy.
Wow, that I have goosebumps, really. I mean, just in the nick of time your dad arrived there.
Yeah.
Who knows what would have happened? Oh my gosh. That is really scary. Right. So this is the point where you realize that things are really, really bad.
Yeah, before when I was...
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, like when I was... Like, I've had many experiences. Like a few months later, my uncle got hijacked, put a gun to his head, stole his car. A couple of weeks after that, they tried to hijack my dad. When I was 10 years old, I had black men chop my door down with an axe. I'm hearing thudding. I walk downstairs, and I see this man chopping my door down. I land up freaking out. I run upstairs. I tell my dad. I have this image in my head of my dad pulling out this punga, which is like this machete, and chasing this man down the road. I've had people put knives to my mother's throat. I had a good friend of mine kidnapped by the mountains around the corner and nearly raped by people on drugs. I had a person that studies with me murdered 5 minutes from where I live at the start of the year. It has been a crazy year. It really has.
Wow. Okay, so a big part of this, as you were saying in your first story, is that you're disarmed. Are you not allowed to have any kind of guns there where you're at?
No, actually, we are allowed. It's just very difficult to get guns because you have to go through a whole process where you have to get permission from the government to buy every single gun that you buy, and you have to hand in a good reason. And for self-defense is not a good enough reason. So what most people do is they actually try to get licenses that says that they are sport shooters or they are professional hunters or so, because that's the only way you can get a gun here. And also it's very, very expensive because the government is taxing guns a lot coming into the country. So if you look at something like a Remington 700, I think your American listeners would know that gun quite well because it's one of the most popular hunting rifles down there. Like we would pay about 30,000 rands for it. That's essentially $3,000. So it's almost 3 times the price that you would pay for it in America. So money and laws is making it very difficult for us to get guns. But up north, where I live, most people have at least one firearm that they in their homes too, because they need to protect themselves.
Okay.
And up north, we are also having a lot of training for people, militias and so on.
I'd rather we don't talk about that.
But we'd rather. But I'll share a video on my YouTube. On my Twitter account, which is of the people that get trained. because they just need to get trained to protect themselves on their farms because of the murder rate that is so high there. I mean, the murder rate, a good friend of mine, Benny van Zyl, the head of the Transvaal Agricultural Union, he told me our murder rate on the farms here in South Africa is 4 times the rate of deaths in the Iraq when the US Army were in Iraq in the war. So it is essentially a slow war zone. People getting murdered every day. They prey on the old people and the weak. They wouldn't go to
Children.
Children as well. They wouldn't go to a farm that is that they know it's a young guy that's on fighting age living there. Like for example, my grandfather's brother, his name David de Villiers was his name, and his wife Raleigh, they got murdered and chopped up with a panga, and essentially they couldn't protect themselves because they were the lady was in the late 80s and the man was in his 90s, so they were just too old to to protect themselves, and those are the type of people that get murdered. It's usually the old and the children. It's not usual for them to go for fighting age men, and that's a bit of a problem. But yeah, as I said, I'll share a video on my Twitter account of some of the stuff that the training that we do up north here. We all have to own guns. We have to carry it. I know you Americans love to carry it because it's your right to do, but I don't think you really use them ever. Like up here, we have to use them on, I would say, a weekly basis or so, or a daily basis. Every day there are shootings between us and people because it's getting worse and worse and worse. If you look at YouTube and Twitter and so on, you'll see pictures. Even on Rational Gent, he's got a picture on his Twitter profile of black people actually going into the streets and to the universities with shirts on that says "Kill all whites" or "One settler, one bullet," or all those slogans. And politicians like Jacob Zuma, which is our president, and Julius Malema, which is probably the most influential politician in South Africa, that go to rallies and say we're going to kill all white people and we're going to take the land and we're going to we're just going to take everything from them and kill them and chase them away. And yeah, that's the reality that we live in. That's it's almost unreal for a person. I know I've spoken to many Europeans and Americans. It's unreal for them to believe, but that's the reality that we live in.
I just want to say one thing. We have our probable next president, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. She's the ex-wife of the president we have now, Jacob Zuma. They want to do like a whole Robert Mugabe family dynasty thing. Today, she wrote a report attacking white people. She said numerous occasions that if she gets into power, she's going to take our land. We're going to be second-class citizens. She wants to pass more legislation against us, barring us from the job market. And one further thing, I just want to let you and your listeners know that you are not going to ship 5 million white people out of South Africa. It's a logistical nightmare. It's not going to happen. So just wipe away this whole notion that there's going to be some refugee aid where you just put us in boats and you take us to Europe. This isn't Syria. We can't just walk to Europe. We can't just walk to the States. We are at the southernmost tip of Africa. Our coastline is crazy. You're not going to move us. Zimbabwe happened. They took the farms in Zimbabwe because there was a South Africa to run to. This is literally Custer's last stand. So we need to find a way to have some sort of self-determination or protection. Ideally, I would love for all of us to work together, but in a perfect world, it's not going to happen. It's a pipe dream. 5 million people you aren't going to ship out. So this is a problem that won't go away.
Yeah, the other thing that he's not saying is that we are professional people here. We are engineers, we're doctors. My family are engineers. We can't just leave everything we have here. We have in businesses, we have practices, everything we have already here. And many times, like if you practice law, like Rational Gent here does, you have to go through a whole process of writing new tests and everything, and that takes a lot of time and money, and which we don't have. And we need to look after our families. And the other thing is we love the country that we live in because it's the country of our ancestors. All of them are buried here. We built this country from nothing up. We're not going to leave it here because it's ours. Our blood went into the soil. We provide food for most of Europe in the old days. tomatoes is one example of what South Africa provided enough tomatoes to feed all of the European countries, or just supply the demand of their tomatoes. And that's just a thing that just shows how much potential, agricultural potential, this country has, which it doesn't have that much potential there in Europe. And that's just what we do here, and we still do it, but we are getting killed off, and that's a bit of a problem.
Yeah, we've been here 120 years longer than the United States was a country. We built up this nation. My ancestors built up suburbs here. Willem's ancestors have built up suburbs up north. This is our land. Our ancestors died here and are buried here, and there's no place left for us to run to. I know a few white South Africans have tried to leave the country and claim some sort of refugee status in Europe, Canada, the States, but they were denied. Maybe if I was an Arab coming from the Middle East, they would let me in. I'm a lawyer, so at least I have that done for me.
Right. Yeah, that's actually a really big problem, is that my country, America, as well as Canada and Europe, are taking in refugees from all over the third world, but legitimate refugees, such as people that might be living, farmers down there in South Africa that have an imminent threat to their lives, some elderly, maybe that can't protect themselves, as you were saying, my country and other countries here in North America won't take them in. In fact, one family was recently rejected, and their application was called racist because they said that they feared for their lives, that they would be killed because they were white, and they were called racist and denied entry into North America. So backing up a little bit, please, maybe you could let my audience know, what is the rationale given, if any, for this violence, particularly against the farmers? So are they, in the city, obviously a mugging or something like this, they're trying to, steal your watch, your jewelry, but up on the farmlands, when they're coming in and they're killing an elderly couple, for example, like the example you gave, what is there any known motive behind that? Is it purely racial, or do they also are they mostly going there to steal things from the house? Is there kind of an understanding in South Africa that, oh, this is why this is happening, or is it not talked about?
I want to get one word in before I let the farmer talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
The ANC utilized farm attacks and farm murders as part of their slow war against the apartheid government. The farmers were very much embedded in the security structure of the country, patrol the borders, etc., etc. So in the late 80s, early 90s, the African National Congress started attacking farms. They put landmines on farms. There were children that were blown up, arms, legs everywhere. So that never abated when we had our one man, one vote. But interesting enough, when Nelson Mandela died and when the Economic Freedom Fighter Party came up and got powerful, farm attacks increased by 200%. So I think they were, in a sense, waiting for Nelson Mandela to die. But yeah, please talk.
Yeah, the thing is, we can't prove anything that Rational Gent said, because we can't just go out and say it's the government killing people. But what he said was true about the history. But one thing that we do know is, on most of these farm attacks, nothing gets stolen ever. And people die in very, very cruel ways. Like, they would boil the soles of their feet and they would chop them off piece by piece, chopping off their fingers, slash them with a panga, which is essentially like a South African type of machete, and set them on fire, make them through burning coals, drag them behind a pickup truck, slit their throats, stuff like that. It's not like they just kill them. It's like they torture them for hours and hours and hours before they kill them. And that's the thing. That's why we feel the hatred so much.
I've got one thing just before questions, if you'll allow me. Mm-hmm. My godfather was born in the Congo. He was a Belgian settler. And on my 21st birthday, he's left the country now, but on my 21st birthday, we were in the car and he told me, Mikhail, you have to understand, this is Africa. Look at what happened in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola. I was kicked out of the Congo myself when I was a child. He tells me they're going to be coming for the land. And when that day happens, are you going to be prepared and fight, or are you going to run? This is tribal. This is Africa. This is land conquest. They want the land. They want the industries we've built. They want the farms that we have built with our own bare hands. They want it. They want the Gibbs. It's Africa.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So this is definitely a war, and you guys are saying, hey, this is our country. Our ancestors built it, our blood and soil, and we want to keep it. We don't just want to flee to somewhere else. And even, you know, quite frankly, if you were to flee to North America or Europe, we're slowly starting to encounter much the same problem from some of our immigrant populations with the raping and the killing and mutilating of, you know, teenage girls and things like this. So I don't know that it would even be much better off in a decade or two, even if we were somehow able to take 5 million people out of South Africa. So we want, as Western white people, to make our stands in our countries. We don't want to continue to cede territory to these terrorists who continue to just mass this global takeover of everything our ancestors have built. So what do you guys think is something that we can do? So obviously a lot of my audience is in America and Canada and a little bit in Europe. Is there anything that we can do here in our countries that would support your effort to take a stand and, you know, keep your land and keep your country?
I think one of the main things that would be very good if we can get pressure from overseas for the government to reinstate the commando system, which they essentially took away, which was our main militia system here in South Africa, where we have farmers and people in the cities that can protect themselves from this absolute violent crimes and so on. They essentially took away the commando system. Nobody knows why. They just did it. And AfriForum is another civil rights organization, which is a classical liberal organization here in South Africa. They are actually pushing for the government to bring back the commando system. And if we can get international pressure to do that, then it would help us a lot. I think that's also the most obtainable thing that you from outside the country can do, activism for that. But further, I can't see any way. Like, I'm not going to say give us your money or anything, because I mean, we don't want to take your money. We have money of our own. That's not a problem here. The problem here is this violent killings and so on happening.
I think from my side, raise awareness, spread the word about what's happening in South Africa. We are the canary in the coal mine. What is happening to us currently will happen to you. It will happen in Sweden. By 2030, they're going to be a minority. We're seeing it already. It's going to happen in the UK. It's going to happen in Germany. And eventually it's going to happen in the States. It's going to happen to you. Raise awareness and attack your liberals. Show them what the real world is like. I'm not going to survive here, neither is Willem. And I won't be able to raise my kids here if we have liberals calling for our slaughter. We need to become tribal, and we need to become tribal-centric. We need to start thinking about our interests and our interests alone. We aren't going to advance as a people globally if we are subsidizing the rest of the planet. So attack your liberals.
Definitely. Those are terrific suggestions. So I encourage everyone watching, if you're watching this live and if you're watching this as a recording, please share this video, get the information out. Where can my audience find you guys? You both mentioned that you're on Twitter. Would you share your Twitter handles with my audience, please?
The Facebook page as well.
Yeah, we are on Twitter. I can share it with you. I'm not very good with this technology and stuff, so I'm not sure how to do it. But
just go ahead and just say it. Just say what your Twitter handle is and spell it for us if need be.
It is Willem Petse.
You can type it in the comment section.
You're gonna have to
check there.
No, I can't. I'm not. I'm not logged in.
No, not there. Not there. And
it's okay. I can put it in the description box below for when this goes up as a recording.
Willem Petse. It's ILLEM space PETZER, and then my handle is @Willem, spelled the same way, PET. So WILLEMPET. That's where they can follow me on Twitter.
Okay.
And yeah, then Rational Gent can also tell you where you can find him on Twitter as well.
Okay, I'm just Rational Gent on Twitter. It's
okay.
Quite an English word, so I'm pretty sure your audience could find it.
Definitely.
And Willem also has a Facebook page that I'm sure you'd like to share.
Just also by the same name.
Okay, Willem
That's
Fencer.
my Facebook. But I'm
Yeah.
not really doing any activism or politics on Facebook, only on Twitter though.
Okay.
I started that quite early, or I started it actually yesterday, so I'm quite new to this whole social media and thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a learning curve, but you'll learn. I know. I'm
Yeah.
still learning myself. I was kind of thrown into it in a way. All right. Well, excellent. Well, I will definitely put your contact information also in the description box for this video so people watching it as a recording can easily connect with you guys. So I encourage people watching this video, please share this amongst your friends, your family, share it on your Twitter, your Facebook, everywhere that you can on social media platforms. Get the information out. And us in North America and in Europe, we can put pressure on our government to encourage the South African government to bring back the commando system militia so that they can actually begin to put up some protective measures to stop these mass slaughterings and torturing and rape that is going on in their country, and help return it to a safe place again. So I want to thank you both, Willem and Rational Gent, for joining me today. Do you have any closing words that you would like to say before we wrap up?
No, I'm good. What about you?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much for having us on the show and just for raising awareness, and thank you to your listeners. It's vital. I want to walk down the streets with my kids one day in a safe South Africa, and if you guys can help me out, I'd be truly appreciative. So thank you.
Yes, of course. We'll definitely do what we can. All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in today. And remember, please share this video. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can support my work by going to wifewithapurpose.com/support. Help me to raise awareness of all the issues that are facing whites across the world right now. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you later.